A little over a year ago, I said this. A lot of people probably do not like the idea of throwing away the current timeline in favor of a new one, but I personally think that this would improve FNAF as a whole if done correctly. Now, I'm normally pretty confident with what I say in these videos, but some big things happened in the past year that actually made me change my mind. In this video, I'll go over what happened to make me think this, and why I think my old video is, well, just completely wrong now. Remember to like and subscribe for plenty more Five Nights at Freddy's videos, and let's get into it. Now, you may be wondering why I'm even talking about this in the first place. I mean, why should anyone care about this year-old video I made when I was really just first getting into making content? The thing about this one, though, is that it was my first to really do super well on YouTube, so it's kind of something special to me that I'm always going to remember and look back on. If you didn't watch it, which most of my subscribers likely have not, you don't have to in order to understand this video. Where context is needed, I will show you clips from the older video. You should still go watch it after this one anyways though. A lot of choices made for FNAF, especially early on, were, how do I say this, not exactly the most reasonable or well thought out. My first point in that video goes into the older FNAF games and how seemingly a ton of choices were made back then with not a whole lot of thought put into them. This is still a true statement. I mean, come on, we all know Scott is not the best storyteller, and there are lingering blind spots and some inconsistencies because of that. The difference now is that after looking back at it, I don't think it's actually a problem. The three main things I brought up in that video were the FNAF 1 newspapers, the FNAF 4 box, and the Withered somehow being the FNAF 1 characters. While these are all indeed still things that exist, they're not actually problems. Why is this the case? Well, Five Nights at Freddy's was already rebooted and I completely missed it. Now, you can say whatever you want about Steel Wool and the direction the story has gone in, but what you can't deny is that a solution to all of these issues has already been presented. Heck, in that original video, I don't even give a real reason as to why these things were issues in the first place. I was not great at making stuff back then. Anyways, the solution to all of these issues that I had with this series is quite a simple one.
Fazbear Entertainment hired the game developer. Those indie games were designed to conceal and make light of what happened. This isn't just an attempt to rebrand.
Now, I already know that a lot of people take issue with this answer, thinking that it pretty much trivializes all of Scott's games, but I really don't think it does. Remember that Scott approved of this answer, meaning that even he agrees with this idea. It's not saying that everything that happened in those original games are fake, it's just a way for them to fix story issues from those games in a clean way. Any small problem from back then is no longer an issue to the lore, as we can just overwrite it with easier solutions from newer media in the series if needed. Back to my main points from that video, one of them was about the Withered somehow being the FNAF 1 animatronics. The FNAF 2 movie gave us an answer to this that worked well and makes loads more sense. They're not the same. In my mind, that's all I needed to hear to fix that confusing issue in the original FNAF 2 game. I also brought up the Bite of 87 for some reason, and honestly, it's not even an issue that we never got confirmation of who did it. I don't know why that was something I brought up in the first place. In this part of my video, I also claim that the first trilogy of games was not a coherent or well thought out story. This is obviously wrong, and we all know this. FNAF 1, 2, and 3, while not answering every single question that they created, do have a complete and satisfying story on their own. The story of the MCI and their souls being set free, or the story of the killer, left to rot and decay for decades before being burnt in an eternal metal prison. Those 3 games on their own stand perfectly well as a trilogy. The only thing I got right in this whole section of the video was this. The gameplay itself is fine, except for FNAF 2. FNAF 2 kind of sucks. My next chapter in that video talked about a few things, mainly the tools that have been introduced to the series that are very sci-fi leaning and rather out there. Five Nights at Freddy's would never have gotten popular if it gave us all the answers. But when all the answers we can come up with as a community is stuff like nightmare gas and whatever illusion disc are, and agony and remnant and all that stuff, I think it's time to take a step back and take a look at what could be done. I say this and then don't really give a reason as to why all these things are issues. In my head, I know what my reasoning was at the time, which is just that I thought all these things were, well, kind of stupid and unnecessary. I still think that to this day. However, I don't think any of these are major parts of the story like some people might think. With Secret of the Mimic releasing, it's safe to say that Nightmare Gas isn't canon and doesn't need to be talked about ever again. Remnant is just the sci-fi explanation for why things get possessed in the first place, but this too is not super necessary. I still roll with the fact that the souls possess the suits, and they do that just because, well, they do. Giving an explanation to something like that just isn't really needed, and it's fully possible to just choose to ignore Remnant almost entirely. That's the beauty, is that you can just ignore certain things and still make a complete and coherent timeline on your own. The other part of this chapter in my original video mentions multiple aspects of the story that have gone unanswered for years. I haven't even mentioned the major things missing from the timeline, like the origins of Freddy's as a whole, Afton's wife literally never being present, or why the FNAF 4 house is connected to the sister location bunker. Man, that video was so bad looking back at it. Sure, these were indeed unanswered questions, and some still are, but it's not an issue to have these in the series, obviously. The origins of Freddy's has partly been answered, but for the other 2 points there, they simply don't matter. I'd write off the FNAF 4 one as an indie game thing, or that it's not actually connected just by cameras or electrical or something like that. Afton's wife is another case of something they could expand in the future, but really don't need to if they don't want to. My claim in the video was that Scott never thought about the answers to most of the community's questions, and like, yeah, duh, of course he never thought about most of them, but I really don't think that's a big deal. The base story of FNAF is well thought out, and everything else is there as a bonus world building or lore detail with small impacts on the story that don't greatly matter overall. The core narrative of Fazbear Entertainment and the Afton family have always been the focus, and I'm sure will continue to be in some form for years to come. FNAF also just thrives on stuff like this. Sure, sometimes it can be a little frustrating to not have all the details, but that's also what makes theorizing fun and engaging in the first place. One last thing that I claimed in this chapter was that FNAF 6 did not give us any answers and instead only led to more. Don't ask me why I said that, I literally have no idea. FFPS was the best way to end any FNAF game we ever had, and continues to stand strong as a great entry in the series, with some of the easiest to follow lore from any FNAF media ever. The third chapter in the original video talks about the Steel Wool era of Five Nights at Freddy's. Now don't get it twisted, I am not saying that the story is better, I am simply saying that the methods being used to tell the story are better. I actually agree with some of this still, mainly that Steel Wool can tell a story far better than Scott ever could. The thing I disagree with here is that the story they're telling is bad. Before Secret of the Mimic, I would totally still agree with that point, but after, my thoughts have shifted like a lot. That game fleshes out the story of the Mimic very well, and knowing his true origins make the inclusion of him in Security Breach and Ruin far more exciting, intriguing, and overall just really great as a story. Now, I do still indeed love the older parts of the timeline, like how could you not? But how many games can they realistically put out based on just the MCI kids or just Afton before it becomes boring? I think that limit was pretty much reached when FNAF 1 through UCN came out, and this shift to the Mimic is a welcome choice. Again, not saying the old timeline games are bad, I'm just saying that a switch up is welcome every now and then. The Steel Wool era still includes things from these older games too, so it's not like it all got swept under the rug and forgotten. Honestly, this might have been the best chapter in that old video because I really do agree with most of what I said originally. There is one more thing I have to talk about though before moving on. I called the story messy, which honestly isn't true. Five Nights at Freddy's can be as simple or as advanced as you want it to be, and that's the beauty in it. This year, I will be making my full FNAF timeline video, as every FNAF creator does at some point in their time here on YouTube, and it will be quite drastically different from most of the more popular interpretations of the lore. The only way I can do this is because of the open nature of the story to begin with, and I think that's wonderful. The story of FNAF is as messy as you want to make it, as convoluted as you want to interpret it, but the freedom that it gives you while doing this is something that very few series can match. That's why the messiness isn't actually a problem at all, rather a feature. Secret of the Mimic should be the last game in the current FNAF timeline, and the one after should begin a new timeline. Yeah, so I went a little bit too extreme in that first video, obviously. A full complete wipe of all the current lore we know is taking it way too far. Now, a different spin-off series could work well with that, but for the mainline titles, that's easily the dumbest thing I said in the original video. I think my main reasoning for changing my mind on this is because of two things. First is Secret of the Mimic. This game brings us back to a time I really never thought we'd get to see, and it fleshed out the start of the timeline more than I could have ever imagined, while also tying into the modern titles too. That was a far better solution than rebooting the whole series. FNAF being so vague at all times actually helped boost Secret of the Mimic into being one of my favorite FNAF games, simply because it filled a previously unknown chunk in the timeline. A reboot, while not taking the lore we have away, wouldn't have built on it any farther, which is something that can clearly be done very well and is a far better solution in my eyes. My other reason for taking back this point of FNAF needing a reboot is that, well, it kind of already had one. Now, not in the sense of a full hard reboot, but more of a soft reboot that changed the direction of the story. I'm of course talking about Help Wanted. After really looking back at it, this game does exactly what I wanted all this time. I just didn't realize it. Since the Steel Wool era makes it very clear that details in those older games can be changed within their era of games, it's as close to a reboot as we will probably ever get, and probably all we will ever need as well. I then go on to, yet again, critique the Mimic's inclusion in modern FNAF, which I already covered earlier in this video. The Mimic is great, and I have no big complaints about it today. The other major point I make here is this. I'm not saying we should get everything handed to us, but I think they should use the way they tell the story in Ruin as a baseline for how they tell this new story. I think that Secret of the Mimic indeed followed many design philosophies that Ruin did, and it resulted in a very satisfying narrative for the game. That's at least one thing I did get right in that older video. Another point made was about the questionable canonicity of the books. I still stand by that today, and any new book should be clear on if they're canon or not, but currently the issue is less prominent due to the Tales books being confirmed with Secret of the Mimic to not be canon. I wish some of the other books would be a little more clear still, but I'll take what I can get. Even though there have only been 2 major releases since my first reboot video, and one of them was a movie based in a different timeline from the games. I think they really changed my mind on how I think about the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's. Secret of the Mimic was the best thing to happen to this series in quite a long time. It fixes most of the issues that I had entirely, while not actually having to do something so extreme and drastic as a fresh start for the series as a whole. Now, is FNAF perfect? Of course not. Nothing is, but the community that has been built around it is one of a kind. This community is so diverse, with artists, theorists, singers, animators, the list goes on. Anything you can think of, it can be found in the FNAF community. I think a reboot would destroy this very special thing that this series has created. And honestly, Five Nights at Freddy's would never be able to recover from something like that. Okay, that's not entirely true. Maybe it would recover, but it would never be quite the same as it is now. No matter how convoluted the story may become or how confusing the lore may get, a reboot is the worst possible solution 100 times out of 100. This series holds a special place in the hearts of many, and erasing that would be the worst thing they could do. It's crazy just how much I've changed my mind on a reboot, and I still cannot believe that I even made that original video. I have no idea what I was thinking. One day, whether it's in 5 years or 50, this series will indeed end, as nothing can last forever. But when it does, I don't want there to be any more after. I don't want it to turn into a Fazbear Entertainment situation of trying to bring something back that probably should have been left to rest. Now, if they want to do something different, such as an episodic show or something like that, based on the series and just flipping certain details, such as with the films, I'd love that. But nothing should ever replace the magic of this series of games. And I don't think anything ever could, even if they tried. With that, this video comes to an end. A good one to start the year with. Remember to like and subscribe for a bunch more FNAF content this year, as I have some big exciting stuff planned. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye, superstars.